All right, guys. So today we'll go through an exercise that is hopefully going to help us with our self-improvement. Of course, we'll talk about it in the context of esports, but this one today is really applicable to every single area of your life. And the exercise is simply asking ourselves a question, which is, what am I not willing to do to improve or to solve this problem? What am I not willing to do? Now, the beautiful thing about this one is that I actually believe that we all know what we're not willing to do. The question is whether we're honest about it and whether we have done any exploration as to why that thing is kind of standing out as a thing that we're not willing to do. Like, why is that the case? So, and this could be, so many different things. And I've seen lots of pro players who are great offenders in these areas too, where there's like some very basic things that they're just not willing to do that it's very important that they should be doing. So, ignoring that for a second, let's give some examples. So again, from the context of esports, it could be that you're not willing to do demo review. You're not willing to put a process in place. You're not willing to do aim training. You're not willing to do to communicate better with your teammates. You're not willing to have confrontation with your teammates. You're not willing to fix your sleep. You're not willing to exercise. You're not willing to fix your food or experiment with that. You're not willing to read a book that might give you some insight on team dynamics or, like whatever it is that you might be struggling with. You might not be willing to speak to the sports psychologist that your team employs, and do so in a way that's good faith, where you're really trying to invest in that process because you're just not open to it. Why is that? Why are you not willing to do any of these certain things? All of these things that I just listed are pretty basic things, I would say. But there is a reason. There are reasons why, for any of them, we may not want to actually do them. And laziness doesn't exist. It's not an excuse. I shouldn't say laziness doesn't exist. I'm being hyperbolic. But what I mean to say is it's in my opinion, it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out to use that term in this context. What we want to do, and why asking this question is important, is because upon asking the question, something will jump out. Like there's a list of things. Like I said, there's this this huge laundry list of things that it could be for any of you. And there, the priorities for these things, it's always going to be determined by you, as you're the one that's directing your own self-improvement. You best. But I do think that these are all common ones that we all struggle with, and it is a lot of value left on the table if we don't deal with them. So why? We need to figure out why. So, okay, what our brain tends to do is it will gloss over stuff that we're not willing to do. For example, there is this phenomenon that is well documented, which is that our brain will selectively forget things in certain cases. And so a common example is used, like forgetting a dentist appointment, because there is an anxiety that's associated with your dentist visits. So your brain might actually, like, you're not consciously doing this, but your brain might actually make it so that you forget that, even though there's no reason why you should actually forget that thing, but it is instead because of that anxiety. A lot of these things can tend to be boiled down to an emotional reason as to why we won't do something. So there's a couple things here. So first of all, you got to do the analysis to really get down to the bottom of the question, which we'll do in a second. And then the next thing that you have to do, after you've done that analysis, is you got to do the thing and give it a go and just experiment. And one of the reasons why this is particularly important is because what we don't want to have happen is we don't want to be completely guided by our sort of reactive behaviors. We want to be intentional with how we do things because, we're animals after all, we're very emotional creatures, and you can allow your emotions to dictate everything that you do, but then, how much are you really in control? Because, we can all identify moments where we're rational and moments where we're emotional. And the ways that we would behave, I think it can often be the case that, when we are thinking emotionally, we're not really able to think from our prefrontal cortex and rationally analyze and understand what the best outcome that we should take really is. We're not doing that if we're emotional. It's like a different part of our brain. We are stupider when we're in sort of, especially when we're in our fully in our limbic system, like the reptile brain. When you're in a really emotional state, you get actually more stupid because different parts of your brain are activated to respond to the situation. So with all of that said, the point is that we need ways to bypass the emotionality, because it's that emotionality that creates problems. And sometimes it's more covert. Like in this particular instance, what I'm describing is your brain is just kind of just shutting the book. Demo review, nah, doesn't really matter. Better sleep, nah. Here is a cope. Here's a cope. You don't need better sleep. You got all that, you're drinking the caffeine, you're playing more than everybody else. Like, that's fine. We find ways to gloss over. We create reasons to disqualify the thing as opposed to looking at it, because that's easier to do. Because if we can feel like we're being rational in our disqualification of the thing that we're not doing, then we don't have to spend energy doing it. And we don't have to confront whatever negative emotions exist there. We don't have to confront the thing that we're afraid to confront. So in demo review, it might be the case you don't know how to do it. Dude, you're gonna have to spend time figuring that out. That's not gonna be as fun as actually just playing the game, deathmatching, doing the things you're used to. It's not gonna be as enjoyable. We wanna have an enjoyable, we wanna enjoy ourselves. However, our rational brain understands that it is actually, we can make a great argument, it's in our greater interest to meet our goals if we actually do the demo review, or like figure out and learn how to do that, and to go through that grind or that arduous process, whatever it is, whatever you're afraid of in this particular case, to go and figure that out. So we need to understand that the moments, and this is why this exercise is important, why asking the question is important, because we need to understand what is motivating us to come to this conclusion that the demo review is not something we want to do. And again, I'm just using demo review as an example, and like I gave like a list of many other potential examples of things that that would greatly benefit you, but you're just not doing. So again, just as another reminder, this video is really to remind you guys to ask the question to yourselves: what are you not willing to do, whether it's in esports or your fitness journey or your career or your relationships? What are you not willing to do to solve the problems that you're currently trying to solve for? And talking about the emotions again, the question is like the antidote to when our emotions sort of I suppose get in the Trojan horse, and the Trojan horse is like, I am thinking rationally, here is my cope, because that's what it is, right? Cope is you trying to rationally disqualify something, and you're doing mental gymnastics to rationalize it, to achieve that, when it's not really the case, right? So let's be honest with ourselves. We've got to be honest with ourselves. And this is important because this is part of acting intentionally. And again, and another solution here to do this is the process. If we have a process, what we're doing is we're taking more intentional control away from our own emotionality. We're able to have a process where it's like, I know I'm going to play this much time. I know I'm going to do this demo review. I'm going to take this many insights from the demo review. I'm going to take that into my game. When I play the game, I do the demo review. I'm going to identify like 1 or 2 technique leaks for my aim. Those will be my focuses in my technique work portion of my process for this week, which is allotted this much time per day. Like having all the processes there allows you to solve the problems really easily. I'll give you a really good example actually as to where this is analogous, and I think shows this a bit better than the esports example. So the gym, when you're trying to achieve something like progressive overload, you should be very sensitive to the amount of stimulus you're providing your muscles, the amount of volume, and the amount of resistance. And so if you're trying to achieve progressive overload, you're trying to do a bit more in terms of the resistance over time, and you need to keep track of the volume because of recovery and everything else. You want just enough volume, but not too much. Too much volume, and you're not going to recover as well, so you'll hinder your strength gains. So having the best way to do this is to track all of the numbers of everything. And the reason why this is helpful is because there'll be days where you wake up and you're like, I just don't feel like I don't feel like I have the energy. Do you have the energy? You might, but you don't feel like you do. And that's kind of an interesting aspect, because there is a mental degree with like the emotions here, where your emotional state will dictate how energized you feel. So even though, and so like, by doing the right kind of things, by just getting into the workout, you might actually find that feeling, because, the endorphins start to flow and that changes your state of mind. But the point is that the numbers don't lie. But your emotions can do all kinds of stuff to convince you that you don't have the energy, that you're really tired, that you just don't feel like it, you can't get your head in the game. Like all of these different things, like the mental battle, the emotional battle is very difficult to win sometimes. And so if we want to put ourselves in the best position to defeat it, we need to equip ourselves with ways to deal with it. So good tools, like having a process, is a tool essentially that you can use to make sure that you're always grounded in rationale, that you're always grounded in this process that feeds itself, and the emotions don't influence any of the things that you do. So it doesn't influence the amount of time that you play. It doesn't influence the type of things that you do when you're trying to improve. It doesn't influence the way that you respond to teammates. It doesn't influence the way that you feel about your playing session as much. We're trying to separate. So much of my content has been about rewiring our reward systems, because our reward systems tend to not help us, our default reward systems. And that is the reward system that the game, the devs are like basically programming for us, because they're saying when you click head and you get kill, it feels good. So what we need to do is kind of we're working against that, because when we're not clicking heads, it's like we're not getting our dopamine fix. Honestly, like if you think about how social media works, it's about constant like dopamine injections. Like they're trying to keep your attention for as long as possible by feeding this to you. So you're combating that sort of thing as well as everything else when you're having a bad performance, when you're not hitting your shots. This is why I made the video recently about not hitting your shots, how to recover. Like this is really important that we understand that although it feels like certain things that feel good, we have the power to actually rewire our brains a little bit and to give ourselves our own positive feedback mechanisms that we decide that is more beneficial for us, so that we are not as impacted when we can't, with things that we can't control. Like you can't, hit a shot every single time. You're a human being. You may have a very high percentage, but you're going to miss sometimes. And sometimes you're going to miss at the wrong moment. And it's going to be very impactful in the match that you missed that shot. And it's going to feel like shit. And so we need to, in knowing that we can't control that, it's really important that we create some systems that help us to not really allow that negative feeling in that moment to compound and become another mistake. Instead, it's just an acceptable bit of variance, and we move on. So I hope this is somewhat helpful for you guys. And I'm going to share now one of the other reasons I'm making this video is because I am asking myself this question too. And at the moment, one of the things that I'm caring the most about is growing my YouTube channel and my content and being able to be a content creator primarily, and do the commentary thing alongside that. So my goal really is to do commentary in CS, get back into the CS world, and on top of that do content creation, and have it be the case that content creation is where I sustain myself financially, and that the commentary is just sort of a bonus. And this is largely because I just want to be able to independently support myself, and if things do get a bit scary, and as they have been, not going into everything, but obviously I haven't been able to find any commentary work the last like 8 to 9 months since I was laid off from 100 Thieves due to their downsizing, and so that's kind of scary. So I want content, I want to grow this thing. So what am I not willing to do to grow this thing? Now, the thing that is the most obvious, and remember again how I said that it's like, you kind of know, when you ask this question, you kind of know in the back of your mind the thing that you're not really willing to be like, all right, fuck it. I'm sorry I've been putting this off. I'm sorry that I haven't been dealing with this, like, speaking to kind of to yourself, but all right, I fucking give in. I'm going to do it. It doesn't matter how shitty it feels, because usually this is the reason again why we won't want to do things, is because for one reason or other it feels shitty. We just have to ask ourselves, why is that? And then we can be like, okay, well, I can manage this. There's so many different ways to manage this. There's a really good quote. What is it? What can be mentioned can be managed. I think I got this from Tim Ferriss a long time ago. What can be mentioned can be managed. So the idea is that by asking the questions, by mentioning what are all the elements at play, and you can only do that by asking the question and looking at these things. Now I can see like, okay, what's in front of me? Now I can, if I need to, I can just tackle it one small thing at a time. I can find a way to manage it. I can find a way to solve the problem. So what can be mentioned can be managed. And so for me, it's going to be scripting videos. That's my thing. So you guys are going to see from me a pretty pretty solid attempt at like a fully scripted video. I've never done this, so let's explore this question with me as like the ending part of this video. So I haven't been doing it because I'm someone that really likes to go off the cuff. And maybe it's because for 10 years of commentary in live environments, everything is off the cuff. And so that's kind of a familiar, comfortable thing for me. It's partly that feels like a strength for me. Secondly, I don't have a teleprompter. so that makes it a bit harder in the sense that I'll need to have loads of B-roll because I need to really, it's going to be harder for me to have my face on camera as much because I want to be able to like get eye contact with you guys. So that's like, how you make these more engaging when you're a talking head. And also, I think lastly, it's the planning and organization parts. That's something that for me is always been something I haven't enjoyed as much, right? Like math always felt like work. English literature always felt like fun. Like it's kind of like that. It's like, yeah, I can do both. One just doesn't feel as good. Like if you give me a choice to walk to those two paths, I'm going to pick that one. I'm going to pick the English lit as opposed to the math. Weird kind of examples to use right now, but but you get what I mean. It's pertaining to things that are more naturally my strengths. And so this actually brings up an interesting point because in being honest with ourselves, we have to recognize when an approach either isn't working or we have to recognize, because leveraging your strengths is great, but at what point do you actually have to gain some new skills, or do you actually have to challenge your behaviors and how you do everything? We probably need to do that a lot more than we realize, because as we fall into patterns and we stop learning, it's going to be difficult to understand whether or not you're leaving, again, value on the table. So I don't know if scripting my videos is going to necessarily fix everything for me, or like, I think give me what I'm looking for in terms of the video's performance, but I know I should try it. I know I should learn this skill and see what happens, because I have identified this clearly as something that I'm not willing to do. And how do I know that? It's because I have come up like to this point of feeling like I need to script videos, and I do it. Like I'll do videos like where I identify the structure and I'll have bullets, and I'll maybe go off of the bullets and then just sort of like do it in a couple different recordings. But I often just do one take with pretty much everything, and I will just cut if is necessary and add if I need to as well. But ultimately, I'm not doing it properly. I'm just doing this is what I'm talking about. I'm doing all these things like to work my way around something that I know I should actually just fucking do. I should just do the thing as opposed to being floating all the way around it. I'm over here, I'm over there, but why am I not just doing the thing? So this is my video. It's kind of like a PSA for you guys, but also like I had to get my shit together a bit as well. So with all that said, I hope that this has been helpful for you guys. Maybe it's inspired some action for at least one person. If so, then it's been successful. And make sure that you subscribe to the channel and check out my Patreon and all of that good stuff. And I'll see you guys on the next video.